All right, we should be live. Hello, everybody. I hope you are doing well. We are going to get started here in just a second. I know we're a couple minutes early here. Just turning all the machinery on like a normal person. Remember, you can always support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. I appreciate that. And if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, go to friendlyatheist.com. You can take care of that as well. Den is here. He is helping me with moderation. So if you have questions or comments anytime tonight, just leave the questions or comments in the YouTube chat and he will make sure I see them in between stories. And oh my goodness, there are so many stories, including a couple I don't think you have seen very much anywhere else. So let's go ahead and talk about some of this stuff. Let me get this first one ready here and we'll go ahead and get started. Making sure everything's working fine. I don't know if you noticed this. This is not my normal computer. Mine is in the shop right now. This is a backup, and I'm just like crossing my fingers that it actually works. So if it conks out at some point in the near future, you will know why. Let's start tonight by talking about Scott Adams. You may have seen the obituary this week. Scott Adams, Dilbert creator and conservative commentator, dies at 68. And that is a very euphemistic way of explaining what his life was. Scott Adams, yes, he created the Dilbert comic strip, which proves you don't have to be funny to be a cartoonist, but he was also, especially later in life, he was a racist, he was a MAGA-aligned cultist, he was a Holocaust questioner, if not denier, he was anti-vax, he loved his ivermectin. I mean, this guy just fell right into the right-wing sinkhole, and it's the reason when he died. That's kind of all anybody wanted to talk about. And for the sake of this video, I don't actually want to talk about his right-wing views. I actually want to talk about how he used his final weeks of life to pretend to promote Christianity, because the way he did it was so weird. And here's what I'm talking about. Specifically, earlier this month, he announced that he had prostate cancer, and the prognosis, I should say, was not very good. He did not have a long time to live. He knew that. He wanted his fan to know that too. And so on January 4th, he did a live stream in which one of the things he talked about was how much he appreciated Christians who tried to convert him. And he said, that means a lot to me, because how would I believe that you believe your own religion if you weren't trying to save me? Which is a very clever thing to say, and also something Penn Jillette the magician said like decades ago, so it's not even really original. But I do want to play one clip for you where he talks about whether or not he's religious. And you should know going into this, he's never really talked about religion much. So as far as we know, he's more or less apathetic when it comes to religion. And then he delivered this little monologue here.
So you're going to hear for the first time today that it is my plan to convert. So I still have time, but my understanding is you're never too late. And on top of that, any skepticism I have about reality would certainly be instantly answered if I wake up in heaven. To my Christian friends, yes, it's coming. So you don't need to talk me into it. I am now convinced that the risk reward is completely smart. If it turns out that there's nothing there, I've lost nothing, but I've respected your wishes and I like doing that. If it turns out there is something there and the Christian model is the closest to it, I win. So with your permission, I promise you that I will convert. But I probably won't spend much time in that phase. So don't expect it to happen today, okay? But argument made, argument accepted.
That is the saddest thing I have ever seen, and it has nothing to do with his conditions. You know this, I know this. He just described Pascal's wager. If you know nothing else about atheism, that's like what you learn in Atheism 101, right? Like, it's such a fallacy that it has its own name. And the basic idea of Pascal's wager is, if you believe in the Christian God and it turns out the atheists are right, uh, I mean, I'm sorry. If you believe in the Christian God and it turns out atheists are right, then guess what? No big deal. You might have wasted some time praying, but in the long run, who cares? Because there's nothing out there in the afterlife, right? But if you are an atheist and it turns out Christianity is true, you're doomed to spend eternity in hell. And therefore, the thinking goes, it's better to play it safe and just accept Jesus. And that is what Scott Adams was saying he was going to do. He said, what did he say? He said, I am now convinced that the risk reward is completely smart. Like, so he did the analysis, he ran the stats on this thing, and therefore he is a believer. And there's so many problems with Pascal's wager that he didn't address at all. I mean, first of all, it's not just that you're wasting time if it turns out the atheists are right. You're not just wasting time, you're wasting money. You are ruining relationships. You might be not portraying basic human decency, depending on how conservative you are. That's one problem. How do we know Christianity is the only other option here? It's not like atheists are right or it's Christians and there are no other options. Turns out there are like 3 gazillion religions out there. Why are those the only 2 that make it into this statistic we're trying to solve? Also, if you believe in any kind of bullshit, that has repercussions elsewhere. Scott Adams is living proof of this, because the second he stopped believing in reality and evidence, it's not just that this guy fell for being a Christian. This is a guy who is an anti-vaxxer. He fell for ivermectin. He like denies COVID. So there are consequences beyond just being wrong about your faith. You know what I mean? You're also manipulating your emotions. There's also never going to be a way to figure out if you are right or wrong in what side you choose. Because if Christians are right, guess what? You're never going to find that one out until you are dead. And even after you're dead, you're not going to figure that one out. So it's a dumb argument to make in terms of why you've decided to be a Christian. And more than any of that, he basically said, I'm going to be a Christian because, the numbers back it up, which if you become a Christian because your statistical model kind of points in that direction, I feel like that's somewhat disingenuous. And couldn't God see through that one that you don't actually believe, but you made a bet on it? I don't know. I feel like the Christian God would be upset about that. After that same God decides genocide's not okay, he might get around to saying this is not okay either. And maybe Scott Adams realized that everything he just said is ridiculous, because not long after he did that live stream, he posted this on social media. I appreciate the outpouring of suggestions and questions, but what happens next is between me and Jesus. I won't be responding to your well-intentioned messages on this topic. There are a lot. I hope you understand, and thank you. Yeah, I'm not surprised there would be a lot of comments on that, because atheists are going to mock Scott Adams, no doubt, but I imagine a lot of devout Christians are like, that's not how our religion works at all. Now, that was January 4th. After Scott Adams died this week on Tuesday, January 13th, his social media account, and I think it was like his former partner, posted this on his Twitter page, a final message from Scott Adams. And it's a long note. And I'm going to zoom in on just the first part of the note right here, because he said a little more here. And let me zoom in just a bit more. See if you could see this. I know it's tiny, but I hope you could see this. My body failed before my brain. I am of sound mind as I write this, January 1st, 2026. If you wonder about any of my choices for my estate or anything else, please know I am free of any coercion or inappropriate influence of any sort. I promise. Here's the good stuff. Next, many of my Christian friends have asked me to find Jesus before I go. I'm not a believer, but I have to admit the risk reward calculation for doing so looks attractive. So here I go. I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I look forward to spending an eternity with Him. The part about me not being a believer should be quickly resolved if I wake up in heaven. I won't need any more convincing than that, and I hope I am still qualified for entry. That is such a weird thing to say, and then he talked about other crap. It's such a strange thing to say, partly because he said he wrote that on January 1st, but he did his live stream on January 4th, in which he said, I'm not a Christian yet. Maybe I'll get there soon, but I'm not ready to say it yet. Well, according to this letter he wrote days earlier, he already accepted Jesus. So I don't know. Did anyone notice that timeline? I have to imagine his followers are not good at making a 2-dot connection. But it's also weird because who on earth believes that this guy who is clearly insincere about his conversion is like, excuse me, everybody, here it is. I accept Jesus. There, I did it. Are we supposed to fall for that? Does anyone think that's what you need to do to become a Christian? Now, here's my theory on this. And this is absolutely my own tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. I think Scott Adams knew that he was on the verge of death. And he also knew that when people wrote the obituaries about his life, they were going to mention Dilbert and they were going to mention all the dumb shit he's said over the past few years, all the MAGA stuff, all the conspiracy stuff, that he's a racist, etc. And I think if you're him, you're like, I don't want that to be in my obituary. What can I do that will make people like me? Oh, I'll just have a deathbed conversion. And that way, people will only write about how I converted to Christianity, and they won't talk and quote me about all the horrible things I said over the past few years. And to some extent, this kind of worked. This was the headline in the National Catholic Register. Dilbert cartoonist Scott Adams takes Pascal's wager, vows to become Christian. Which, that article totally ignored all of his right-wing extremism. There was another article. This is from Focus on the Family's Daily Citizen. Look at this headline. Dilbert Scott Adams credits evangelizing friends with leading him to Christ. That story is so bad. Let me show you how it ends. It ends with this plea to keep being annoying, Christians. Please join us in praying for Scott Adams' health condition and conversion, and that he will use his voice and platform to share truth about life's sacredness and use his own testimony to advocate against physician-assisted suicide, which, by the way, is something Scott Adams talked about and seemed to be okay with later in life. But look at this last part. In the meantime, keep sharing the good news with your unbelieving friends and family. Remember that God can use your interest in their salvation to help assure them of his love and interest in them. So see, kids, it worked on Scott Adams. Just keep being annoying to everybody. I promise you, the unbelievers will love it. That's not helpful at all. I will say, after Scott Adams announced his plans to convert, and even after he died, there were a lot of commenters who seriously believed his last-ditch effort to get into heaven would work, as if it wasn't just some calculated tool to earn goodwill. Scott Adams could have used his final words to apologize for spreading so much misinformation. He did not do that. Instead, he offered a shallow, half-hearted conversion. That is not an embrace of anything associated with Christianity, because he didn't mention, here's what the faith taught me. Here's what Jesus said that I hold true. Here's what I learned from the life of Jesus. He didn't talk about any of that. He did the bare minimum, or so he thought. Like it's a side hustle to win over the most gullible people in the country. And it is ironic to me that if you ever read Dilbert, you know that the entire comic strip was about telling readers that the people in power, your bosses at work, for example, have no clue what they're doing. Everyone higher above you at work is totally incompetent. And yet, this guy, Scott Adams, in the later parts of his life, acted like the people in government, the MAGA cultists in government right now, were the leaders we truly needed. The most incompetent people our country has ever seen. And he's like, these people have a point and we should listen to whatever they say. Scott Adams didn't take his own advice ever. He ended up becoming just as cynical as the people he mocked in his comic strip. But he did know his audience. He knew they would fall for this conversion. He knew people would rush to praise him because it boosts their narrative that persistence and pressure and coercion can win souls over to Jesus, even when it occurs through a mathematical calculation and nothing sincere in your heart. Right? I don't think anyone should waste any time thinking for real that Scott Adams converted, that he spent any time talking about Jesus. I mean, he was busy believing a whole bunch of other superstitions. He doesn't need this one. And all he left us with is a reminder of how easy it is to lie about your religious beliefs and how willingly some people are to believe that lie. All right. I mean, rest in peace, because you're not in heaven, man. I don't know what you're doing now, but there you go. I will pause there for now. What questions we got here? Oh, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Appreciate that. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member as well. By believing Pascal's wager, you of course lose something, the respect of logical, critical thinkers. Yeah, I mean, Scott Adams lost that a long time ago, but he's really, really going for it to push away all the rest of the people now. It sounds like they're in a competition. Who is they? It sounds like they're in a competition, like Scott Adams versus anyone else who might want to get into heaven. He's like, well, I'm going to say this, so I'll beat you to the pearly gates. His conversion is probably the funniest joke he's ever told. And just like his other jokes, not that funny. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Give me 1 second here. Okay. In just a second. Web fluid? I did not know that. Okay. In 2024, there was a Christian hate preacher who goes by the name Greg Locke. I've talked about him occasionally on this channel, though it has been a while. Greg Locke is one of those fire and brimstone, I'm going to exorcise the demons out of you preachers who in recent years took this like MAGA turn. So he runs Global Vision Bible Church in Tennessee, and he used to have a building, and then he was in a circus tent for a while, and then COVID happened, and he realized he could really win people over, the sort of people he wants to reach, by telling them they were being lied to and spreading lies about masks and vaccines. He said a lot of very horrible things. And so this is not a good guy. By the way, this past week, he was bragging on social media that he was delivering a sermon at Mar-a-Lago. That's how close he is to the Trump administration and the right now, because he played the game. He spreads conspiracy theories. So, of course, they love him. Anyway, in 2024, he posted on social media that he was nearly the victim of the worst kind of Christian persecution. Specifically, someone, he said, fired gunshots into his home. And this is where it's kind of disturbing. Let me share with you the post he made on Facebook. This is what he said at the time, if I could pull this up here. This is on September 4th, 2024. It's 2 a.m. And for the last 3 hours, our home has been a full-blown crime scene. According to the security cam footage, we pulled into our driveway exactly 1 minute after a madman unloaded an entire magazine of bullets from an automatic weapon into our house, garage, and my truck. The sound on the video is truly horrific. And then he says, like, nobody got hurt, thankfully. One of his kids was in the house, but was not injured. Definitely scary. I don't wish this on anyone, but he did say this thing happened to him. And very quickly, he started two things about that story. One is that post I just shared with you, that was shared like 20,000 times online. And plenty of people were like, this is what happens when you preach the gospel. People are going to come after you. It's really bad and dangerous. And Greg Locke did not stop that narrative. Because his whole thing, if you listen to his sermons, his whole thing is Christians who are like him and yell their sermons to people every week. They are always victims. They're always going to be persecuted. This is a guy, in case you're not familiar, this is a guy who has said children with autism are suffering from demon possession. He blamed the United Nations for what the Israeli government is doing to Palestinians. He called for more attacks in the Gaza Strip. He is a book burner. I said he's an anti-vaxxer. He thinks the moon landing was fake. He said once that witches, anonymous witches, were watching his live stream and they were sitting in front of their cauldron and casting spells. Totally. He also thinks public schools are on a hiring spree for witches. And he once invited Jim Brewer, the SNL/MAGA comedian, to his church, and it wasn't funny at all. And more recently, he's been accused of spiritual and financial mismanagement of his church. So his working theory is everyone's out to get him. So of course, someone tried to, fire gunshots into his home. And days later, he was preaching and he told a version of this story. And specifically, he said, and I'm not going to play it for you because it's like over 15 minutes long. He said if his attackers ever caught up to him, he wasn't about to reverse course because they are going to kill us for standing for righteousness. That's why they were coming after him, right? He told the story about how he was out with this family that night and they had a lot of premonitions telling them maybe stay out a little longer. And so they did. And when they finally returned, he saw like glinting metal on the ground. And he's like, what is that? Broken glass? And no, it was the casings of bullet shells. And there were so many. And he made it sound like his entire family could have been killed if they had just been inside the house at the wrong time. And he ended this sermon by calling on everyone to praise God because God still protects his children. That's why Greg Locke is still alive, because God was protecting him. And then he made a message. He said a message deliberately to the person who did this. He said, we are not going to slow down. We're not going to back up. We're not going to compromise. We're not going to be cowards. We are not going to just quit what we are doing and hang around a bunch of woke sissies that don't have a backbone. Unquote. Right? So in short, if this gunfire was an attempt to stop him from preaching, he wasn't going to back down. And at one point, when a journalist wrote about this story, someone online chimed in and they were a little shocked. This person said, people are buying his story. Unbelievable. To which Greg Locke says, what's unbelievable is you taking so lightly to what just transpired. That's total trash for real. He sounds like a bully in a 1980s sitcom, but okay. He's like, how dare you disbelieve the story I've been telling? And then he delivered another sermon the next week where he said gunshots are again not going to stop me. He said, Jesus is going to be the focus of my finish. The crowd can try to distract us and discourage us and shoot us and belittle us and hate us. But at the end of the day, I'm looking to Jesus. So very much playing up this incident as if he's the hero because he's not going to stop preaching. Let me share with you one more clip from one of his sermons where he talks about this incident.
But I want to play you this, lest you think that this is just some small, nonchalant situation. This is 10 o'clock at night, 10, 18, 17, at the end of my driveway. This is a sound that was picked up, by the way, 50 yards away. Okay, 50 yards away. 60 rounds in less than 3 seconds. 60 of them. The detective said he'd never seen that many spent shell casings in a drive-by shooting situation like this.
I mean, scary. I'm not doubting that that's scary. But he makes it sound like they were coming after him. Everything he's saying makes it sound like they're coming after him. And when one Christian media outlet wrote about that sermon, he praised them on social media too. Thank you, church lead, for sharing this story in a truthful way. Thank you for sharing exactly the message I was trying to get out there. Now, the gunshots happened in September of 2024. And like within a month or two, Greg Locke and his family had moved to a different house, not too far away from where they were. And then he kept acting like he was being persecuted in his new home. He actually said in a different video that someone had left a voodoo doll on his property. And he shared that with the Christian media outlet too. Look at this. We'll keep preaching. We'll keep loving people. We'll keep being generous. We'll keep praying. We'll keep fasting. We'll keep prophesying. And we'll keep casting out demons, Locke said. And we will keep rebuking this voodoo spirit that somebody tries to bring against me and my family. Because clearly that voodoo doll was out to get him. It's such a strange story because for all of his building up of all of this, we actually didn't know who did it, why they did it, what this was all about. And then in December of 2024, there was a breakthrough. The Wilson County Sheriff's Office announced that they had arrested someone in conjunction with the shooting. And I'll jump right down here. During the execution of the search warrant, 20-year-old Tyler Poole of this town in Tennessee was taken into custody. He was being held on bail. So they found the guy. He was some 20-year-old dude. What they did not say in that message is why this guy did it, supposedly, what any of it had to do with Greg Locke. So weird, interesting. We don't know if this guy was an atheist, if he was some, did Satan hire him to take out Greg Locke? And what is it that Locke said that made this 20-year-old want to take his life? No idea. And guess what? This week, that kid, Tyler Poole, he's not a kid, he's 20, 21 now. Tyler Poole pleaded guilty to some of the charges against him because this case was about to go to trial. And I think his lawyer told him, you're going to lose. So Tyler Poole pleaded guilty. He will be going to jail for 5 years. I think he has a year served. So he'll be in jail for the next few years, which is good. What he did is wrong. But I say all this to get to where I want to go with this story, because just this week, the Roy's Report, which is a Christian media outlet as well, but they do a lot of investigative reporting, they posted an amazing story about the shooting. And look at the headline, 2024 shooting at Greg Locke's home wasn't persecution against controversial pastor, but an attack directed at stepson. What? What are we talking about here? By the way, you got Tyler Poole on your left and you got Greg Locke on your right. What is going on in this story? And this is by reporter Daniel Silliman. Basically, there were a couple things that happened in this article. First is that they spoke to the prosecutor of this case, the person who got the guilty plea from Tyler, and they asked, so what does Greg Locke have to do with any of this? Absolutely nothing, said the assistant district attorney. A juvenile had an argument with another juvenile like boys do. They got into it, someone got mad and got a gun. This was a spat between two young people, and this goes on. Poole was facing a jury trial. Like I said, he pleaded guilty. Yes, we know that. Look at this. The state had extensive evidence he was feuding with Caden McGee, Locke's 17-year-old stepson. Poole went to the house where McGee lived that night, and he wildly fired off dozens of rounds from a .40 caliber automatic handgun, reloading the weapon multiple times to keep shooting. He just unloaded on the property, the house, and the vehicle. But, if I scroll down here, law enforcement found no evidence that Poole ever intended to stop Locke's preaching. No evidence he cared about Locke's sermons, tweets, or the controversial stands Locke took on Trump, the 2020 election, LGBTQ people, Jews, COVID-19, or other issues. So, none of this had anything to do with Greg Locke at all, which, I don't know, that seems interesting. And in that article, Greg Locke did not comment, but here's where it gets even more interesting. Because maybe you could argue, okay, this had nothing to do with Locke, but I'll tell you what, if someone shot up his home, I think it's reasonable to think the most famous guy in your house might have something to do with it. So maybe it wasn't unfair for Locke to jump to speculating that they were coming after him. That doesn't seem far-fetched. But according to this article in the Roy's report, guess who else the reporter talked to? They spoke to a guy named John Guffey, who used to be the former head of security for Greg Locke, and he was there when the shots were fired, or he showed up shortly after the shots were fired. And just in case you want to know, the security guy, Guffey, he's still a Christian, and he's still pretty much a conservative Christian, in case you were wondering. But he said that he stopped working for Locke in part because of how Locke handled this particular situation. Because not long after the security guard showed up on the scene, it seemed pretty obvious to everybody, including Greg Locke's family, that it was really their teenage son who was the center of this story, and none of this had anything to do with Greg Locke. Look at what the security guy said. The shooting had nothing to do with Greg Locke or the church, and had everything to do with Greg's wife's son, Guffey said. Greg knows it was Caden, and it had to do with Caden, but he's also like, hey, we can use this to our advantage. Oh, that's very interesting that Greg Locke seemed to know that night that this was not about him. What else does the security guy say? Let's find out. This is fun. We were standing out in the driveway, he said. The cops were taking pictures of the back of the truck. Greg's wife, Taisha, comes back out of the house. She's standing there for just a minute, and she says, now that I think about it, I think it was a hit on Greg. According to Guffey, the security guy, Taisha repeated the idea several times, adding, I think it is. I think it is. Then, according to Guffey, she explicitly said, we were going to let people believe it was an attack against Pastor. So is she the ringleader here? Is she the one deciding that we can use this to build up the ministry? Weird. And then finally, the security guy says, it's a good story to tell, Guffey said. It was done to bolster his reputation. So that's what the guy very close to the family said. And when you add that understanding to the full context of the story, it becomes very clear what Locke did. Because if you go back and see what he said about the incident, he never said explicitly the shooter was out to get him, but he repeatedly offered his congregation breadcrumbs so that they would come to that conclusion. And when other people suggested the link was there, he didn't stop them. He encouraged the speculation. And I checked for this. As far as I can tell, he's never once, even this week, bothered to correct the record or let his followers know, hey, all remember that thing that happened to me? It had nothing to do with me. Now, I reached out to Locke because for some reason we talk. We're like this. I reached out to him and I'm like, hey, do you have anything to say about this story that basically calls you a liar? And the response he gave me, which I will show you right here, was interesting. Here's what he shared with me. First, the Roy's report is the Jerry Springer of internet reporting. We could stop right there. No, they're not. They do their homework. I follow a lot of Christian media. I'm telling you, the Roy's report does good work. They are Christian. They're a conservative Christian. They have standards that are like, we're not going to use trans people's names or pronouns. But when it comes to stories like this, they talk to people, they interview people, they have the documentation to back up what they are saying. So no, it's not the Jerry Springer of internet reporting. What else did Locke say? It was my family in our home, so it had everything to do with me. I've never claimed it was over my preaching. Really? because I played you a clip. It sounded like he was kind of saying that. I said and still say, when you're making the devil angry, he fights you. My kids could have died. So the why means absolutely nothing to me. It only means something to critics and liars looking for 15 minutes of fame. People use tragedy to fabricate a narrative that makes them seem credible. The Lord will reward them according to their words. And that is a hilarious thing to say, because the accusation here is that Greg Locke fabricated a narrative to make himself more credible. But he's using that one against all the critics. What else did he say? When I made the point that night, the night it took place, everyone was still in shock and had no idea what was happening. Okay, but the security guard says very much, you all kind of knew what was happening. And Greg Locke also says at the bottom here, we've forgiven the young man and plan on visiting him in jail very soon. We wish him nothing but the best. All of us have made dumb decisions, and those decisions can either destroy us or define us. And you know what? That's nice. I happen to agree with that. I don't want this 20-year-old to be judged by the dumbest thing he's ever done. So I'm with him on that. But to begin your statement to me by basically calling the article fake news, that doesn't help anybody. That makes you look not credible whatsoever. And also, like, here's my summary of what happened then. Locke seemed to know early on that the shooting was not about him. But he allowed, and in many ways actively encouraged people to think that this was about him. He portrayed himself as a martyr, or a potential martyr, who was under the protection of God, which is not very different from what Trump did after that attack on his life before the election, because the evidence has shown the guy who tried to shoot the bullet there, he didn't actually give a damn about Trump's beliefs. He was kind of a random dude who was just out for, I don't know, attention or notoriety. But what did Trump say afterwards? God was protecting me. Because that's the narrative he knows makes him look good to his Christian base. It was a calculated performance, is what I'm saying about Greg Locke. And I think it also says a lot about his church that people there seem to fall for it too, because, I don't know, conservative Christians love any narrative that casts them as the victims, right? They look for persecution everywhere. The White House has already started an anti-Christian bias task force, even though there's no actual Christian bias in the country relative to any other group out there. And that's the thing about Greg Locke. Facts don't matter in his vicinity. He makes up the narrative. He expects his followers to just buy it hook, line, and sinker. I did ask him, hey, what about the fact that the story said that your wife said, we'll just lie about it, right? We'll just say that they were after my husband. And I asked him, what did you think about that? And he said, he made that up. She never said a thing. She never said such a thing. I mean, listen, who do you want to believe? Do you want to believe the reporters who talk to a bunch of people, or do you want to believe the guy who has a long history of lying about everything? I don't know. That's what Greg Locke's morality points him to, though. Lying about everything that makes you look good. And that's why I don't find him credible. That's why I don't think anyone should take him seriously. Not just because he's Christian, but because he is a guy who wears the costume of Christianity to lie about whatever he wants. And listen, I don't think anyone should judge their family for this. Like, if his 17-year-old son got into a fight and there were guns involved. By the way, reports said the guy who did the gunshots, he was mad over a drug deal gone wrong or something like that. And again, I don't think anyone should judge the kids. I don't know that's not hypocrisy to me. I think every family has their issues and this is theirs and whatever. I'm not judging him for that. I am judging him for allowing this narrative to go on for years, for over a year, and not putting a stop to it. Because it sure as hell seems like the story is not what he made it out to be. All right, I will stop there with this story. What questions you got here? Is this guy from Texas? No, he's from Mount Juliet, Tennessee. It's just outside of Nashville, in case you're wondering. Sounds to me like some common sense rules on magazine site might be in order. What are we talking about? Common sense rule. Oh, on magazine size? Oh, I don't know what that means because I know very little about guns. But I assume, like, why are we shooting that many bullets? Is that what we're talking about? I have no idea. Sorry. Greg so wants to go viral. He really does. He gets so excited when he goes viral. Like the first time he went viral, or not the first time, but he's gone viral for burning books. And so he does it like every year now. And he's very much like trying to scare people into caring about the shit he does. And like people aren't paying attention anymore. And I think that makes him sad. So he's got to up the ante somehow. What else we got? Are they 100% sure that Tyler isn't a witch? I'm pretty sure if you ask them, they will say they're not a witch. No one in their family's a witch. It's everyone else who's not them who is possessed by the demon. Clearly. I assume he thinks I am a witch. Teen arguments absolutely do not normally end with someone getting a gun. I agree with you. Also, I don't know what happens in rural Tennessee. I don't know how white people end their fights. I'm not saying it's normal. I'm saying, like, whatever. This is the way these dumbasses handle their business. All right, man. If you want to scare someone with gunshots, that sounds dumb to me, but what do I know? The Lord will reward them according to their words, not their actions. I mean, one of the things about Christianity is your actions very much do not matter. And that's why you could pull a Scott Adams deathbed conversion. And if you were sincere, it'll wipe away everything. And that is a flaw in the system, but I don't think they all care about that. I can't believe he responded. I'm telling you, man, we are like this. We call each other up. We talk once a week, share recommendations on everything. We're buddies. Can I say, I did reach out to him because I was like, I've talked to this guy before. Maybe he'll respond. He did not respond to the Roy's report, other than some church spokesperson said, hey, we don't have a response. We've all moved on from this. Something like that. So I'm like, that seems very un-Greg-like. So I did reach out, and I was surprised that he responded. I'm magic is what I'm saying. Oh, thanks for that donation. What if Pascal was right, but the only true God was forgotten about millennia ago? Also, when will you respond to Eli Bosnick's claim of humanist award vote rigging? I did not know Eli was spreading lies about that award right there, of which there were no votes taken. But sure, Eli, it was rigged, and I'm a better vote rigger than you are. Suck on that. I don't know. Is this live always on Thursdays at the same time? I try, man. I try so hard to be at the same time on Thursday nights, unless shit's going on, in which case it changes. All right, I'm jumping to a different story. I feel like my backup computer is going to conk out very soon. And at that point, this show will end early. We'll find out. Gonna try to whip through stories before that happens. It's probably because I have 11,000 tabs open. All right. This is an interesting story from Oklahoma. In Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, which is not far from Tulsa, the city council there just told a group of Muslims they cannot build a mosque, a second mosque, in their community, even though it looked like everything was fine on paper. And this is a really incredible story that it's not done yet, but I wanted to update you so you know what's going on, because I feel like we're going to be hearing about this for weeks to come. Here's the story as I've made sense of it. You have the Islamic Society of Tulsa, local group of Muslims. And I know it almost sounds funny to say there's a group of Muslims in Oklahoma, but this is the thing about like religious minorities and ethnic minorities. They have various cities and areas, and they all migrate and congregate in the same spaces. So like outside of Chicago, parts of New Jersey, parts of Texas, you will find huge Indian communities. You know what I mean? So there is an Islamic Society of Tulsa. They have a mosque, but they're starting to outgrow it. And so they needed to go to the city of Broken Arrow in this case and say, look, we bought land here a while ago. We want to develop this land and build another mosque, but we need your permission to be allowed to do that. And one of the reasons they need the city's permission to do it is because they are building on land. Not only do you have to rework all that property and make it, commercially available instead of farmland, but also you're building something that's not going to bring in any taxes for the city. So the city has to decide what they want to do about that, because they would much rather have businesses there and not just a gazillion churches and mosques or whatever. So they need permission from the city. But in most places, that does happen. If a religious group wants to build a place and they got the money for it, it's kind of a formality at that point. So they want to build this new place. The property they bought in 2014. It's only about 15 minutes from their current location. And in 2019, the city said that area that includes that tract of land could be used for commercial reasons. And they would allow people to apply for special permits if they wanted to build a church or synagogue or a mosque or anything like that. So it's kind of up to the Muslim group to put together the paperwork and the lawyers to get this stuff in order. They got to go to the city, ask for permission. The city has to give it to them. It's a lot of hassle, but that's what they were trying to do. What they said they wanted to do is they want to build a 42,000 square foot community center with a medical clinic that is open to the public and a worship area and a 20,000 foot retail area for shops for small businesses owned by whoever. And they also promised they would deal with sewage and drainage issues on that land before construction began. Okay, fine. So they had to go in front of the city's planning commission to make their pitch. And before the city's planning commission could vote on this, you can bet what people were saying about it. Here's what it looked like at the meeting. "Cowards," shouted one of those who stayed to the bitter end. "You're all going to be sued," said another. A third muttered something about terrorists. Yikes. And the reason they're saying cowards and you're all going to be sued is because the planning committee said, yeah, go ahead and build your mosque. It's fine. And that infuriated people. And in this article, there was another section that was kind of amazing. "It blows my mind that this is even being considered," said Lane Brown, a Rogers County Commission candidate who is active on social media. Brown cited the recent shooting by Muslims of military personnel in Washington and Syria and said the commission would quite literally be inviting that kind of violence into this community. Why? What does that shooting have anything to do with these Muslims outside of Tulsa? Nothing. They're just brown and Muslim. That's it. So this is what we call racism. Others said Muslims constantly lie to get their way. One or two called the spokesperson for the group a liar directly to his face. This idea that, oh, all Muslims are if you said that about any other group, Christians, it would rightly be called out because how dare you generalize that way? And then, "Islam is not a religion," many said, "but a culture of conquest and power determined to take over the Western world," as if extremists get to dictate what true Islam is like. They cited everything from personal experience to 7th century massacres to the Northwest Ordinance to Charlie Kirk, because of course they cited Charlie Kirk. So bunch of bigots were very mad that a mosque was going to be built in their area. Blatant Islamophobia and no amount of assurances from the Muslims that no, we're all peaceful here. We just want to have our building and worship. None of that was going to sway these people. And for what it's worth, their spokesperson was like, you do have legitimate concerns about traffic. Like, what if there's a lot of traffic on the road when we are having worship sessions or whatever? And what about drainage? Those are legitimate issues, and we will address those. But also, man, the bigotry was appalling. And he said this later, too. Check out this from the spokesperson. "The one thing that really hurt me is this idea of wanting to take over the country. No normal person thinks that way. We don't do that." The Tulsa County Republican Party helped rally the opposition through emails and social media, and several GOP leaders were in attendance. National Committee woman Karen Hardin said State Senator Christy Gillespie and former State Senator Nathan Dahm all spoke against the project on technical and economic development grounds. Which, okay, fine, you can argue against it on technical and economic grounds, and it's telling that the politicians were doing that while knowing damn well that the sort of people who vote for Republicans in Texas were going to take the mantle of bigotry on everybody's behalf. So, the conservative bigots were able to say they're anti-Muslim screeds. Professional Republicans said why it shouldn't be built on technical reasons. But again, to their credit, the Planning Commission said, it seems like it's fine. You still got to do a lot of paperwork, but we give you approval to do this, right? Oh, by the way, I should have said, before they cast their final vote, I think, after they cast that vote, the city council of Broken Arrow still has to accept the recommendations of the Planning Commission. And that was this week. And before they had their meeting, there were other meetings about this mosque. And guess what was said at those meetings? Look at this. We do not need or want another Dearborn, Michigan, or East Plano Islamic Center, said Sherry Thomas of Broken Arrow, who is concerned Muslim citizens will overwhelm the city if a mosque is built. Yeah, buddy, you think Muslims are going to take over the Christians in Oklahoma? Are you kidding me? We're talking about a couple thousand people. It's not that many. Calm down. And also, why? What's going to happen in Dearborn, Michigan? Oh no, too many good places to eat? Calm down. They reject our laws and customs, and as you can see by their own writings, their goal is to take over and impose their laws, not assimilate, embrace, or comply with our Constitution or our culture. So the problem, you see, with Muslims, according to this lady, is they don't follow laws and they don't respect our Constitution, which I know would make you think, wow, this lady probably hates Donald Trump and what Republicans are doing, but nope, she has no commentary on them. Just the brown people. Islam is incompatible with our Constitution. It's the job of our government to protect our culture, legal interests, and citizens' rights and freedoms, not pander to those who are hostile to our Constitution. Now, excuse me while I go vote for Republicans everywhere. These people are insane. I also want to show you this. This is from the Oklahoma Doge. That's a group that exists. This is what they said in response to the Planning Commission's thing. Your Rhino, Republican in name only, your Rhino Broken Arrow Planning Commission just approved the Islamic Center for rezoning. Like big splashy text, like, oh my God, they're going to build a mosque. Oh no. And then this was the one that surprised me the most, because I've done a lot of stories on this live stream about Oklahoma and church-state separation issues and Ryan Walters and all of that. But the one guy who has been a surprising good guy in all of those stories was Gentner Drummond, who is the Attorney General of Oklahoma. He's a Republican, but he's been weirdly supportive of church-state separation. Amazing at church-state separation. And now that guy is running for governor. And I'm like, you know what? If that guy becomes the governor of Oklahoma, I know I'm not going to like a lot of his stuff, but at least I don't have to worry about church-state issues. Well, like I said, Gentner Drummond is running for governor of Oklahoma, and that means he has to make it past a primary. And so this is what he posted on his site. Drummond launches investigation of proposed mosque in Broken Arrow. And look at this. Oklahomans deserve confidence that local land use decisions are being made lawfully, transparently, and in full compliance with state and federal law. My office will examine whether the proposed development and the processes surrounding it meet those legal requirements. And then it gets worse. Moreover, Drummond said his office will investigate funding sources for the initiative. Land for the development is owned by the North American Islamic Trust, which reportedly has ties to the radical Muslim Brotherhood. Given the realities of global terrorism, why are we bringing this up? There can be no compromise on public safety and security. In our state, we've already seen a radical Islamist sentenced for plotting mass murder. Several 9/11 hijackers had attended an Oklahoma flight school. It is only appropriate to act with caution when the project in question might have connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. Oh my goodness, this dude is doing the same thing the bigots are doing, which is, I know one other brown person who's horrible, therefore I'm going to slander this entire community about them. You cannot get away with that. That's like textbook racism, bigotry, whatever you want to call it. I promise you, these Muslims are not your problem. They're literally going to the city planning commission saying, we would like to build a mosque and we have blueprints. Will you approve this so we can send our money to your city and build a place? Someone had, one of these people had argued, you're going to have like calls to prayer and it's going to be so loud and annoy the entire city. And they responded with like, that's not what we do. We have speakers inside the building, but like at our other mosque, we don't have speakers outside the building. The noise is going to be contained. Ask our neighbors at the first mosque. They will tell you we are good neighbors. But like, whatever, they're running with anything here to stop these people from launching. By the way, speaking of claiming that we don't want terrorists in our midst, and we're going to make sure none of those other people that we can loosely connect to a terrorist attack are allowed to build space here. Who do you think did the Oklahoma City bombing? Timothy McVeigh was a white Christian nationalist, as I would use the term today. But no one's saying, well, we can't build a church because Timothy McVeigh was also a white Christian. So this week, the Broken Arrow City Council had their meeting where they were going to vote on whether they should accept the recommendations from the Planning Commission. And you can take a wild guess as to how that went. Here's an article about it. The crowd, which seemed to peak at over 400, was told the meeting was not about religion, but literature unfavorably comparing Islam to Christianity was handed out. And while the nearly 2-hour conversation stayed mainly on topic, the loudest applause was for a young woman who said she had converted from Islam to Christianity. Okay, congrats for having a hobby, lady. That's, who cares? It also got a lot worse on that regard too. But after all this conversation, and the bigots took the stage during public comments, said a lot of racist stuff as well, the city council decided to vote 4-1 to reject the planning committee's approval for the zoning request and special use permit. And some of the opponents who voted against this, they cited secular reasons for their objections. One guy said the infrastructure needed to support such development is not in place at this time. But also, like, there were plenty of people who were there who were arguing about other stuff. Look at some of these. I want to show you a certain thing if I can find it here. Look at what one lady said at the meeting. Linda Russell, a Broken Arrow resident, claimed the Islamic Society of Tulsa has been repeatedly connected to terrorist organizations. They have not. Referencing an investigation opened by Attorney General Gentner Drummond last week. Hey, look, the press release is working. It's making bigots do their bigoting. Counselors, this is why we're having this discussion. When an organization has been repeatedly connected by courtroom rulings, FBI investigations, and public officials to extremist groups, caution is not fear-mongering, it's common sense. There are no connections other than some people are brown. These Oklahoma racists are like a special kind of racist. And guess what? After they had this little meeting here, the bigots were so happy. They were celebrating this thing. Look at this tweet from a Christian nationalist pastor. This is the way. Outlaw mosques. Just do away with them all. Christians simply need to wake up, organize, stop fighting with each other, and show up. Why? Because they were celebrating that the city council said no to the Muslims. Wait, that's not all. What other comments do we have? Oh, look at this lovely Christian here. That's my state. We're going to kick the rest of them out. That's lovely. How's this? Are people getting the message? When it comes to Islam, it's them or us. Islam is not a religion. It's an intolerant, aggressive geopolitical system that is incompatible with civilization. Now excuse that guy while he votes for Trump to take over Greenland. Like, just the weirdest kind of racist. And how's this one? Just say no to Islamification, which is a word he just made up. Oh my God, these racists in Oklahoma. Now, the Tulsa County Democratic Party, I will say, in response to the hate, they called out the city council members for staying silent while some of these bigots were delivering their message during public comments. But at some point here, at this point, it doesn't look like the Islamic Society of Tulsa has much of a choice. Like, the city council said, we're saying no to you for secular reasons. Can you really fight against that? Other than going back to the drawing board and making another suggestion or finding another plot of land to use, it's kind of hard to fight this thing. But they did say a couple days ago they are going to consult with their lawyers. And I will say, right before I went on to do this live stream, they issued this comment to the local news. Check this out. We appreciate that participation in the democratic process sometimes leads to disagreement. We are also, however, disappointed that fear-mongering and misinformation dominated the discourse around our proposal, and that the Islamophobic frenzy on social media may have had an impact on the council's decision to deny our application. IST intends to pursue all options to challenge and reverse this myopic and discriminatory decision through legal avenues, including a challenge brought under RLUIPA, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, which prohibits government entities and municipalities from imposing discriminatory or substantially burdensome land use regulations on religious institutions. They may also complain to other bodies. We'll see about that. No lawsuit has been filed yet. But here's my takeaway from this. Like, these people did everything they were supposed to do. They did it right. And I think if we were talking about a mega church that had the same land issues and traffic issues, we would not be seeing this discussion. That's the bottom line. That's why I think it's fair to say this is Islamophobic. I mean, and I think atheists should care about this, because if a Muslim community can do everything right to build a mosque and still be denied because elected officials don't have the courage to confront hatred, then we don't stand for religious freedom one bit, do we? Because they can do this to anybody who's not a Christian. This is not a local controversy to me. This is like canary in the coal mine. It is a warning, and it shows what happens when local leaders allow bigotry to fester and take over. And it's what happens when hate is normalized at these meetings. And even if they claim, even if the city council members say that this vote is best for their community, so far they've been very complicit or silent as all this bigotry is playing out. So we will see what happens as a result of this, but I wanted to give you that update for now. What questions we got here? Pure racism. It sounds like they're planning to build a nice facility, including helping people. That was my takeaway too. I wasn't bothered by anything they were doing. And by the way, locally where I live, this sort of thing has happened before too, where, yeah, there's a group of Muslims who want to build a mosque. They go through all the channels. There are Christian bigots who fight against it for no good reason. And thankfully, I live in an area where our elected officials tend to do the decent thing here. So we did not have the same end result. Ours is okay. There's a mosque nearby, but that's not the case everywhere, obviously. I don't understand how Islamophobia is still so bad 24 years after 9/11. Like, have literally none of the cultural conversations about Islamophobia reached these people? I mean, we saw it with Zoran Mamdani in New York City, right? They were using stuff about 9/11 as reason for why you shouldn't vote for him, even though he has nothing to do with it, obviously. And I think he was like 8 years old when it happened. If anything, he's borne the brunt of the racism against Muslims growing up in New York City, but they were still blaming him as if now that he got elected, it'll be like 9/11 part 2 or something. I mean, no, I mean, bigotry's always been around. Racism's always been around. It doesn't go away just because some people get enlightened after a tragedy. I spent some time in Broken Arrow in the mid-'80s. 3 people asked me what church I went to before I got out of the airport. Oh my goodness. I don't think I've been to that area. I have been to Tulsa, beautiful place, but I don't think I've spent much time outside of like big cities in Oklahoma. Maybe one day. We'll see. I keep forgetting that Christians think Jesus was white. Them and Megyn Kelly, man. Santa's white. Jesus is white. Always. Canonically white. Don't tell them to point on a map where Jesus grew up. Did you see the new docs on the ICE sociopath who murdered Renee Good? The new docs? I don't know which ones we are talking about. I have been following that tragic story, but I don't know what you're referencing here. So I don't know what we're getting at. So I'll skip this one. Watching from the Philippines, Agnostic Atheist here. Thank you for watching. I appreciate that. Hold on, you're misunderstanding separation of church and state. You ironically even break that supposed law every time you sue religious people because the court is upholding your... I don't know what we're talking about anymore. What are we talking about? I don't know if that's a response to me or someone else. Whatever. We'll move on. All right. Okay. This is a bizarre story involving this guy right here, Ken Paxton. He's the Attorney General of Texas, and he just sued another state agency for what he claims is religious discrimination. And if you're looking for evidence of what he's talking about, good luck, because you're not going to find it. But I will try to tell you his story, and this is courtesy of Cora Nees at KXAN. And according to that report in that news outlet, Ken Paxton's lawsuit claims that the Department of Public Safety is discriminating against Christians. And here's basically the gist of what he's saying. The Department of Public Safety puts out a driver's handbook, like every year or every few years. And this is the book you study if you're trying to get your driver's license. It's the rules of the road. Maybe you read it if you're like trying to renew your license. I don't know. My version of a driver's handbook like that is something I read when I was like 15 or 16, and I've never opened it ever since. I don't know why anyone's reading this thing, but the Department of Public Safety prints this book. They put it out, and this is what he's referencing. Because according to Paxton, if I can find the thing I'm looking for here, there is a rule about what that handbook is allowed to say. And what Ken Paxton says is the Department of Public Safety has adopted a rule prohibiting religious advertising in the handbook. And he says that rule discriminates against religious organization speech while allowing secular groups to purchase ad space in the book. And this is the thing I'm going to show you here that Paxton is talking about. This is the rule that they are following. The department may contract with a person or small or large business to provide advertising in any Texas driver handbook or mailing. And the rules are all advertisements solicited by the department must be in good taste. That makes sense. And the following subjects or types of advertising may not be included in the handbook or the mailings. And what are we talking about? We got religious ads, controversial organizations, ballot measures, tobacco ads, ads contrary to agency goals, political ads, gambling ads, controversial issues, alcoholic beverages ads, personal or offensive issues, and ads that mention the department anywhere in the advertisement. So there's a lot of restrictions on what ads are allowed to go in the handbook, but one of them, number one, are religious ads. And Ken Paxton says you are banning religious ads but allowing others. That's discrimination. Okay, maybe he has a point, but if you're going to say this, then what you got to do is say, look, here's last year's handbook. Here is an advertisement for like White Castle. And yet there was a church that tried to get their church advertised in the handbook, and the department said no. That's discrimination. We're going to court to end this rule. But there's none of that in the lawsuit at all, not even close. And you know why? Because apparently the current version of the handbook has 0 ads. None whatsoever. And neither does like an older version I saw online from like 2012. And that makes sense to me, because why the hell would you advertise anything in a driver's handbook? Like, who do you think is reading the driver's handbook looking for ideas for what to buy? If you are like a fast food restaurant even, you would not put it in the driver's handbook, because like no one's reading that to figure out where to go because they don't have a license yet. So like, yeah, who would be advertising in there? So like, that's like putting an ad in the dictionary. Who's reading it for fun? That's a waste of your money. So even if the law allows for advertising in the book, there is no proof that the Department of Public Safety accepts advertising, much less discriminates against religious groups that want to purchase ads. By the way, if you go to the Department of Public Safety's website right now and said, I would like to purchase an ad in the upcoming driver's handbook, good luck, because there's nowhere on their website where you could learn about how to buy an ad. There's nowhere to give them your money for an ad. It doesn't exist because they don't do ads in the book. And my favorite thing about this story is when the reporter contacted the Department of Public Safety to ask about this lawsuit, this is what they said. On Friday, DPS told KXAN that it does not use ads in the driver handbook and hasn't had any discussions with the Attorney General about the subject. Ken Paxton's office did not even call these people up to say, hey, people who like work in the same building, I assume, I don't know, do you do advertising? He didn't even bother doing that. One of his minions was like, I found an example of religious discrimination. Hey, Ken Paxton, aren't you running for Senate? Wouldn't this be good for your Republican primary? And Ken Paxton's like, hell yeah. Anything to get people off the fact that my wife divorced me on biblical grounds, whatever that's supposed to mean. So Ken Paxton's like, yeah. Just say they're going after religious discrimination and no one will ask any questions about it. And here's the other thing I wanted to point out in this lawsuit that kind of made me laugh. Ken Paxton, in defending his argument that the Department of Public Safety cannot discriminate against religious groups, he cited atheists. He cited a lawsuit brought about by atheists in defense of his own thinking. And here's what he meant by that. In 2012, if you go back to 2012, this was a time when there were a lot of atheist billboards going up. They were getting a lot of media attention. And there were also ads on the side of buses and ads anywhere. People were paying attention if atheist groups paid for advertising. And some of those ads were funny, comical. Some of them had a little slogan to go along with it. In the UK, they had like, God probably doesn't exist, so stop believing and enjoy your life, something like that. Well, in 2012, the Northeastern Pennsylvania Free Thought Society decided they wanted their local transit system, the County of Lackawanna Transit System, or COLTS. They wanted COLTS to put up their ad on buses. And they also did not want it to be controversial, so they would be rejected. So let me show you the ad they submitted. This is it right here. Atheist, period. And it has 2 URLs for the NEPA Free Thought Society and American Atheists, which was helping them sponsor this ad. And guess what happened when they submitted that? It's like the least offensive ad ever, but Colts rejected that ad and they said it was too controversial somehow. I don't know how. They actually said at the time, we will not allow our transit vehicles or property to become a public forum for the debate and discussion of public issues. So what did the atheists do? Well, they decided to revise their ad and try again, so they submitted another one. It was this one. Atheist, period. But it just has one URL for the Free Thought Society, and it doesn't include American Atheists. I don't know if that helps any, but they submitted that, and guess what? That one was rejected. And Colts then passed a new policy saying any ad promoting the existence or non-existence of a higher power or anything like that is forbidden. And so they tried one more time. The atheists tried one more time, and they submitted this last ad. NEPA Free Thought Society, here's our URL. And guess what? Colts said yes to that. which is very weird because atheist is controversial, but free thought is not. Are you kidding me? They're kind of synonymous. And also, if anything, accepting the third one suggests that you were discriminating against atheists. And so there was a lawsuit filed. And long story short, in 2019, it took years. In 2019, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit ruled 2-1 that the atheists had the point. They had a point. And this was discrimination against atheists. And in fact, it was such an obvious answer and decision that the person who was part of the majority was Thomas Hardiman, who was a guy that Trump has included on his short list of Supreme Court nominees. So why do I bring, and by the end of that story, Colts had to pay out over $275,000 in legal fees. And I bring that story up here because Ken Paxton said that decision is why the transit system, the driver's handbook in Texas, they're not allowed to discriminate against religious organizations. See, it's not allowed against atheists and it's not allowed here. I think what's ridiculous is every lawsuit you have to tell the courts, you have to rule my way on this because this is what I get in return. This is what I need to have happen. But what does Ken Paxton want the courts to do? Like, does he want a judge to step in and forbid the Department of Public Services from rejecting ads? But they already reject all ads. They don't take any ads. And yet in the lawsuit, Ken Paxton said, harm to Texas citizens is imminent if he doesn't get his way. And also his lawsuit doesn't force the DPS to take advertisements at all, which means even if he wins, they can just keep doing what they're doing and not accept any advertising, and it would be fine. But here's the interesting thing. To put this another way, Ken Paxton, if he loses this case, he's going to say, I'm fighting for conservative Christians because I fight religious discrimination, even if the liberal courts are against me. And if he wins the case and nothing changes, he's going to say, well, I won because I'm a fighter. So this is a win-win for Ken Paxton that he, I think, is hoping will distract from all the controversies and scandals he's involved in. I don't know. This feels like a God's Not Dead future script to me more than anything else. But also, his lawsuit just shows you how little facts matter to conservatives when it comes to our legal system. They don't matter to Ken Paxton. They didn't matter to Joe Kennedy when the Supreme Court ruled on that football coach who wanted to pray at midfield after games. They just make shit up. They make up discrimination that's not really happening, and then they get the courts to go their way because they run the courts. I mean, that should tell you a lot about what the bias against Christians is actually like in this country. Doesn't exist, no matter what the Trump administration or Ken Paxton tells you. Oh, all right, I will stop there. What questions we got with this story? Atheists, we exist. That's offensive. That's very much what that whole campaign was all about. And thank you for being a member. Sorry if I missed this, but why is there a period in their logo? There isn't. They just said atheist. I think we're talking about the atheist billboard, right? Like atheists. They put the period there just because it seemed like a definitive statement of sorts. I thought it was cute, but apparently it didn't matter. It was still offensive. As a cyclist, I wish people would read that thing. And as someone who likes reading, I wish people would read anything. But yes, as a cyclist, I understand people don't follow rules of the road. And it would be nice if they did. You need to let all religions advertise or none at all. This place chose the latter. What's wrong? Exactly. Not only did they choose the latter, they said no one gets to advertise. No one does it. I'm sure this is the first time they've even seen that rule that says what they're not allowed to choose. And they're like, whatever, we don't take anything, so it's irrelevant. So they don't need to change the policy because the policy doesn't even apply. Hemant covering the story is reminding me to put Ken Paxton's office number in my phone to call and complain about this absurd waste of my taxpayer money. Hey, if you live in Texas, do whatever you can to make sure he doesn't get into the Senate. Honestly, I go back and forth. I kind of want him to win the Republican primary because he's a horrible candidate. But then I am kind of worried he's going to win the Senate race. But you got some good Democrats running for that one. So, I mean, I hope they can take it over the top. Who knows? All right, jump into another story. Give me a moment here. So I mentioned this earlier. This is a backup computer because my normal one is busted, and I honestly don't know if this is going to go out any second. So for the sake of triage, I'm going to jump to a different story than the one I wanted to do, just because I definitely want to get it in case we get conked out here. Okay. I've watched a lot of sermons over the years, and every now and then they want to deliver a message, but they want to do it in a way that you're going to remember, right? And so recently, there was a church. This one's in Florida. Pastor Terrence Mullings of History Makers Church in Florida. He delivered a sermon where he really wanted a visual to send the message. And the message he's trying to send is that sometimes you feel like you're struggling, you don't know what to do, but you're not trusting God enough. God knows what he wants to do with you. God has a plan for you, even if you don't know it yet. So you might feel like you're floundering. You might feel like you're out of place, but that's just because God hasn't put you where you need to be. That's the message this guy wanted to send, and I'm going to show you the way he decided to do it. I found it very disturbing. You might as well, but I'm going to show you this clip anyway.
All right, you are quick. Imagine if God said fish and says to Adam, let there be fish. This is a fish. This is a fish, everyone. This is a fish. It's pretty, but I can imagine Adam looking at this fish going, talk. What are you doing, fish? Talk, walk, sing. What do you do? What is this thing? What is this thing? It's dumb. Oh, see, a fish out of water looks like a failure. But if you take that fish and you place it, hang on. This fish isn't a failure. This fish just hadn't found its place yet. Can I tell you, when you are in the place that God created you to be, you don't look like a failure. This looks phenomenal.
So that's disturbing. Yes, that's a real fish. Yes, he's just depriving the fish of being able to breathe. That's, to me, animal cruelty. I say this as a vegetarian, so maybe I'm biased here, but why? Why are we doing that? That just seems needlessly cruel. And for what? To prove a point? Let's just torture this goldfish or something just to prove a point that I could have just said to you. But apparently he's not a good enough pastor to just deliver the message. So he's got to do it that way. And that to me is just all kinds of disturbing, because these people will do anything and they don't see anything wrong with what they just did. And people in that church are watching that and applauding it. And the thing, I did a video recently about pastors who steal sermons from other pastors. Well, guess what? This isn't even an original idea, because apparently other pastors have done this exact same thing. And hats off to the website Protestia, which is a conservative Christian website that has beefs with the way a lot of ministries do church services. So I got this story from them, and they're the ones who pointed this stuff out. But it turns out this sermon that was just delivered has happened before. And not long ago, I'm trying to get the year here. I think in April of 2024, it was done in Texas, and it was done by the megachurch pastor, Ed Young Jr. of Fellowship Church. And this is what Ed Young did. And this is a guy who's like, I'm a megachurch preacher, so everything I say and do is perfect. Here's what he did.
Look at our goldfish. Wow. They're having a good day, aren't they? Huh. Just a second. I'll catch one. I got him. Well, a goldfish is dying, flopping, floundering around. Sorry, buddy. You were a couple of dollars, but today is your last day. It's just what, I mean, I don't want to be bad, but the thing's dying. I'll rescue him. Some of you were more worried about that goldfish out of water and dying than you are people in your lives dying without Jesus.
So all of you are like that fish, and if you just convert, it's like you're being thrown back in the water. That one was disturbing too, but also disturbing because we're just, hey, camera, let's zoom in and watch this fish be sad because he's about to die. Again, why? Why do they need to do this to prove a dumb point? And by the way, I know there are lots of stories about this when it comes to like purity culture. And this is a story that I've heard told by many former Christians who are like, they want to send the message that you shouldn't have sex before marriage. And the way they do it is they go around the classroom and they're like, spit inside this cup, everybody. And it goes around the class and everyone in the class is spitting in the cup. And the last kid, they're like, do you want to drink out of that cup? And the kid's like, ew, no. And they're like, well, that's what it's like when you have sex with someone who's not a virgin. It's like, that's a horrible message to send. That's not how anything works. But like, bad illustrations are a hallmark of conservative Christianity. I'm going to show you one more version of this because there is another one. This is also from Protestia. And this is from New Beginnings Church in Bedford, Texas, with Pastor Bruno DaCosta. He did the same thing. And the year he did this was also 2024, I believe. Here's this one.
You know what the problem is? Yeah, that's exactly the problem. The same way you see these fishes dying here and you didn't do anything to help them. You see people dying out there and you have the same reaction. Oh my God, she's going to hell. Oh my God. We see people dying out there, but we don't take action. We don't do anything. We don't care. We truly don't care about them, because if we did, we would give them the hope, the medicine to heal their souls and to save their souls from hell, because hell is real. I'm going to save them. Don't worry about it. I got them. Chill. I'm not going to let them die.
One, I don't know if I am less mad about the plagiarism than the torture. Why are they doing this? Why do they think this is effective? Why do people go to a church where this is the sort of thing they do to send a message? I don't know. Why does this disturb me so much? Like, when it comes to like animals and stuff, people do way worse stuff. I mean, they'll eat fish. So, but just the needless cruelty here, I don't know. It makes no sense to me. And I don't know if I'm being overly sensitive here, or you're also, even if you eat meat, even if you eat fish, like, do you find this disturbing as well? But all of those illustrations are just awful. And I do not understand why anyone would want to go to a church where this is what they have to do to convince you that, like, believe in the gospel. Otherwise, the fish gets it. I need to do this to share this illustration. I don't know. I don't love it, and I watched it, and now I made you watch it. So that's all I wanted to share with you here. I'll take any questions from you here. Definitely animal cruelty, and they are really doubling down on animal talking. They love animals talking, man. All the time. Serpents doing it, fish doing it. Why not? Why would they clap? Because the applause sign in the church went off. And when the pastor gives you the clap, please clap signal, you got to do it. Otherwise, you go to hell. That's how it works in mega churches. So he's being God, putting a being where they're going to die, then rescuing it. Yeah, and you make a good point here, which is that the fish would have been fine if you left them right where they were. You're the one who caused their problems. And what is Christianity? We create the problem of sin, and then we provide the antidote for it, which is whatever it is they're selling you. Like, everyone would have been just fine if you never entered the picture. All goldfish go to heaven. I mean, if only, right? Oh, thank you for that donation. I appreciate that. All right, I got a couple more if I have time to get through it before the computer dies. Okay. Tell you what, I'm going to try to do one more story and then I'll call it tonight. And hopefully next week I will have my computer back. We will see. But I have done several stories about Micah Beckwith, who is the lieutenant governor of Indiana. He's a Christian nationalist. And this is a guy who has said in recent years, and I've done videos on him, but he has said the LGBTQ movement is operating out of a demonic playbook. He says the 3/5 compromise that you might have learned about in history class was a good thing. He said his own election was a choice between godly boldness and the Jezebel spirit. He says the people who advocate for church-state separation are the LGBTQ community trying to support Hamas, which I did not know about me, but there you go. He also said Zoran Mamdani was wrongly trying to force his values on New York by daring to be Muslim. He says a lot of dumb things, and he's a heartbeat away from becoming governor of Indiana. That's Micah Beckwith. Anyway, recently, Micah Beckwith, he has a YouTube channel where he talks about stuff and not a lot of people watch, but why not? He has nothing better to do. And one of the things he said on his recent show is that every single one of the founding fathers would totally be labeled a far-right Christian nationalist without a doubt. All of them. Here is the clip, then we'll talk about it.
If you were to take the entirety of the founding fathers, and even, not even just the framers of the Constitution or those in the Declaration of Independence, but just the entirety of the multiple hundred founding fathers that we label, you would see that every single one of them, by today's standards, would be labeled a far-right Christian nationalist, without a doubt. So our nation was absolutely rooted in Christian values by these men who laid down their life, their liberty, and their sacred honor for you and I.
None of that is true. I mean, everything he just said was a lie, which I know he doesn't care about because he's the sort of Christian who thinks God gave him permission to lie in the name of Jesus. It is kind of ironic to hear him celebrate those founders because if they were around today, you know damn well he would be calling them like heretical, woke leftists who deserve to be tried for treason because they're not going along with everything Trump is doing these days. But in any case, he is so wrong about so much of this. Part of this, I think part of the confusion, let's say you take what he just said in good faith, which he doesn't deserve. But why is he getting this information? Well, they all mention God in a lot of their speeches and things like that, which may be the case for a lot of them. But keep in mind that like 250 years ago, we didn't know about evolution. We didn't have much diversity of religious thought in the United States. So customary references to God, that's just kind of the way people talked. Actual belief and the way they believed and the type of belief they had, that varied all over the place, especially when you look at specifics of all the slave owners who began the country. There have been so many books and articles written to dismantle everything he's saying. He has read none of them. But I just want to point out a couple of things here. Like the founders, if he believes they were far-right Christian nationalists, it's not like they accidentally forgot to include God in the Constitution. They deliberately excluded God. It's not an error that they said in the Constitution there should be no religious test for public office. That was very much part of the design. We were not a Christian nation back then. Any claims that we were a Christian nation back then make no sense. They didn't want it to be a Christian nation. They were fighting for religious freedom. And the only way you could believe otherwise is if all you read and listen to are like steady bursts of David Barton-esque pseudoscience, pseudo-Christian history, whatever. David Barton lies about this stuff all the time. He thinks all the founders were Christian and he lies about it, and he has a wide following. But that means you're not listening to anyone who's credible or doing any kind of investigation on your own. I mean, just go look up the Jefferson Bible on Wikipedia and figure out what that one is. Or maybe people like Micah Beckwith are under the false impression that all those changes that were deliberately made in the 1950s to put "In God We Trust" on money, to put "Under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance, to make "In God We Trust" our motto. Maybe you were like, I didn't know that happened in the 50s. I assumed that was a founding fathers' original thing. And it wasn't. So those were not the things done by the founders. Those were just done by the reactionary Christians of the time. And they were trying to whitewash the record, which is a secular record. Our nation was founded as a secular nation. This is what actual historians say and believe and back up, no matter what you read. And the reason I'm disturbed by this, because like Christian zealots telling lies, that is not a new story. That is very much a dog bites man story. But Beckwith is not on the fringe. He's the lieutenant governor of Indiana. Just last week, I think, I made a video about how Indiana's governor and attorney general filed a lawsuit to install a 10 Commandments monument outside the State House. And their argument is that this is a part of American history as well. And it's not. All of these people just lied to themselves about the founding of our country, and they use it to justify all the shit they're trying to do now. That's why Beckwith's doing here, what he's doing is so malicious. It's not like he's hashing out some disagreement that historians have. He's trying to retrofit his insane extremist beliefs onto well-documented history that doesn't match his narrative. Based on everything we know about the founders, they would be appalled by what Republicans are doing today in terms of religion and other things. But like the founders were a collection of, some people believed in God. There were deists. There were people who actively disbelieved in the miracles of Jesus. That's the Jefferson Bible. You will find people who are very much not conservative Christians the way we know them today. And this, I think this whole video, Beckwith, he proves what I've been trying to say for a long while now, which is when facts become inconvenient, Christian nationalists like him, they never revise their theology. They just try to revise the facts to suit their needs. This guy, Beckwith, he thinks, he wants us to believe that the men who were so meticulous to the point of obsession over the writing of the Constitution and the Declaration, they were such incredible wordsmiths. And yet, oops, they totally forgot to stick God into the founding documents in any substantive, meaningful way. Oopsie, we accidentally created a secular framework for the country. And I don't know if I want to believe this, that maybe he's doing this in part because he's worried right now, because I think he knows fewer and fewer people are buying what he is selling. And so he's just got to keep pumping this narrative. And if that means changing the story of the foundation of our country to justify his propaganda, it's not going to bother him, because there's no commandment that says thou shalt not lie, apparently. The founders rejected the very logic that Beckwith is pushing for now, and he is betting that enough people will not remember and will not care. And so anytime you see people doing this stuff, please speak out against it, call them out on it. It's disturbing. I'm going to stop there for now. What questions we got here? Deists are not Christians by any definition of the word. Right. I mean, they believe in God in some nebulous way, and that's it. It is not the story of the Bible. Oh, yeah, the deists. Yes. The people that Beckwith totally forgot. Thank you for that donation. George Washington didn't take the communion. I mean, this is the thing. I was trying to go through a list of like all these founders and how they didn't believe what conservative Christians believe. And it got so long that I'm like, I can't do all of this. Read the books that have been written about the founders' faith, because there are a lot of books about that. Andrew Seidel has written a book about how we're not a Christian nation. Why do they keep trying to rewrite history? See, kids, this is why you need to learn to educate yourself with facts. Like, there's no way Indiana is one of the top states when it comes to education in the country either, right? I'm not saying that, like, because I live in Illinois and we like dunking on Indiana, but like, this is what they're trying to do nationally with education. If you tell people to force these lies in the curriculum, maybe in another generation or two, they'll stop getting called out on their lies. All right. That's it. I should be back next week at the same time. Thank you, Den, for helping out here. And remember, you can subscribe to the newsletter at friendlyatheist.com. Go do that now. You could do that for free. And also, you could support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. Yeah, that's it. I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Thanks.